Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. I'm Sherry Zievenbergen. You were born, you're gonna die, and your adventure is your dash in between. So make the most of it. Unlock your potential in all aspects of your dash by embracing your uniqueness and living in a way that's authentic to you, not by doing more things, but by focusing on the right things. I'm a former corporate leader turned coach who's on my own journey, and I'm passionate about helping you on your journey too. So on the podcast, we'll explore how to live authentically by deciphering who you truly are and what you truly want. Are you ready to take a step toward designing your dash? Someday doesn't actually exist, so let's do it now. Hello, welcome back to the Dash Mindset Podcast. Today, I would love for you to think about an example of a time when you walked away from an interaction with someone and thought, what? It was just a generally confusing interaction. Maybe the person responded in a way you weren't expecting. The person did something that made absolutely no sense to you. You may have been trying to explain something that just seemed so incredibly obvious to you, and the other person just wasn't getting it. And if you've been awake for more than 20 minutes and have had any interaction with another human today, this has probably happened to you already today, right? For a lot of us, it's really easy to go immediately to, what is wrong with you? And maybe we don't say it out loud. Hopefully we don't say it out loud. Sometimes it comes out, but we're generally thinking it. A lot of times we're generally thinking it. And that assumes that we've already figured out what the problem is. A lot of times my brain will go to, what is happening in the middle of the situation? Or what just happened here? And I try to keep it in my head. Sometimes it comes out, especially if my kids are involved. But what I try to consider is, amidst all of this, I try to consider, what am I missing here? Now, like anything else, this is far easier said than done, but it's something I try to do. I try to ask, what am I missing? So rather than assuming that there is something wrong with the other person, it allows us to just get curious about what we might not understand yet. And so I decided this is an episode I should really do because I'm going to be leading a session at the Hawkeye Chapter ATD conference on September 30th, which I encourage you to attend. If you're in Iowa, attend. It's going to be great. Lots of great speakers. And so I was asked, Sherry, when your audience leaves the session, what question do you want them to leave asking themselves? And my answer was really, what am I missing? That's really something we can ask ourselves every day because we have a tendency to fill in the gaps and think that we have everything we need to know. And when we're talking about communication, relationships, teams, or even how we see ourselves, there is almost always context that we don't have. We respond to the information that we do have that's available to us. Of course we do. That's what we have. The problem is that we don't always recognize how much information isn't available to us. Someone says something or does something that we don't expect them to do, something different than what we would do, and our brains automatically fill in the rest. Our brains fill in the gaps. We decide what it meant, why they did it, what they were thinking, and our interpretation starts to feel like fact. We just take it as fact. We think they don't care, they're being difficult. Oftentimes they should know better. Sometimes we're right. But asking, what am I missing, isn't about inventing some wonderful explanation, some excuse for someone else's behavior. It doesn't mean we excuse things that aren't okay. It just means we are less automatic about assuming something's wrong with what we're seeing. It just leaves room for the possibility that what we see isn't necessarily all there is to see. And that's important because we don't respond only to what happens. We respond to what we think what happened means. So imagine someone doesn't follow through on something you expected them to do. Okay. And maybe you don't even have to imagine. Just think about a time this happened. And you may have decided they just don't care. You're going to respond based on the belief that that person doesn't care. But then you find out that person just genuinely did not understand what you expected. Same behavior, very different context. And probably a very different response from you. That is one of the places that we have some unnecessary friction in our lives. That's the source of it. Because we start trying to solve something before we really even understand what's going on, before we have the whole story. Something isn't working, so immediately go into problem solving mode. We explain ourselves again. We decide what we think the other person needs to do differently. We put in more effort because that's what we do. Meanwhile, we may be working incredibly hard to solve a problem that doesn't actually make sense, that doesn't actually even exist because we don't have all of the information, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. We're halfway through fixing the thing before we've stopped to ask whether we know what the thing really is, what's actually happening, before we really ask, okay, what am I missing here? So asking the question, what am I missing, allows us to get at least a little curious, to go back to that person whose behavior makes absolutely no sense to us. And to really consider, okay, why are they doing it that way? Because I'm looking at the situation based on what's obvious to me. I'm looking at the situation through everything I know and everything I bring to it, my experiences, what matters to me, the way I naturally think, the information I have. And the other person is looking at the same situation from their perspective. So something can be completely obvious to me and not remotely obvious to them. Maybe they know something I don't. Maybe I know something they don't. Maybe we're not even trying to accomplish the same thing. I don't know, which is kind of the point. So the minute I can move from, what is wrong with you, to, what am I missing? I'm in a very different place. Not necessarily a nicer place, not a place where I suddenly agree with them, just a more curious one. And curiosity is what gives us access to information that certainty does not. I'm going to repeat that because I really like that. Curiosity gives us access to information that certainty does not. When I'm certain I already know why a person did what they did, there's nothing left to learn. I've got it figured out. I've got you figured out. When I'm curious, there's room for something I haven't considered. And this isn't only about other people. This is about ourselves too. We fill in the blanks about ourselves too. Something isn't going the way we think it should when it comes to ourselves. And we immediately go to, I need to be more disciplined. I need to be more consistent. I just need to make myself do it. Maybe, it's getting up at 5 a.m. I just need to do it. Does any of that sound familiar? It's quite familiar to me. I get into this a lot. And then my go-to is trying harder, which might be the case for you too, if you're human, because our favorite solution to being human is usually more effort, try harder, do more. But when we interrupt that thought process with that same question, what am I missing? Maybe the issue isn't discipline at all. Maybe I'm trying to force myself to operate in a way that just doesn't fit me. It just doesn't fit who I am. Maybe there's something underneath all of that, underneath what I'm doing, that I haven't even bothered to understand because I went straight to judging it. Now, that doesn't mean I never need to change my behavior. Sometimes I absolutely do need to get off my butt and do the thing, unfortunately. But I have a much better chance of responding in a useful way, in a more effective way, if I understand what I'm actually responding to. It's not about endlessly second-guessing ourselves or assuming we're wrong. Sometimes just asking, okay, what am I missing here? Allows us to get more information. We look at the situation differently and discover maybe we're absolutely right. Okay. At least now we're responding with more context instead of assuming the first story that we had in our head was the whole story, because it hardly ever actually is. So think about how easy it is for one comment in an interaction with ourselves or with another person to turn into an entire story. Someone says something and I hear it through my filter, because that's what I have. I decide what the other person meant. I respond to what I decided the other person meant. And then the other person responds to my response based on their own filter. And suddenly we're heading down a path neither one of us wants to be on. We've all done that, right? And oftentimes we don't even realize the path we're heading down and the fact that neither one of us even wants to be on it. So sometimes the most useful thing we can do is interrupt that whole process with, okay, wait, what is happening here? What am I missing? Maybe nothing, but likely something. And that little bit of space really does matter. We're never going to have all the information. We're never going to understand every person perfectly, including ourselves. We're never going to stop making assumptions altogether because we're human and that's how we operate. But we can get better at recognizing when we've filled in the blanks without realizing it. We can get a little more curious before we start judging or fixing or forcing or working harder to solve something we don't even fully understand yet. And so if you're listening to this, thinking about some of the things you might be missing in your own life, in your own work, in your interactions with other people, in your interactions with yourself, this is a big part of what we're going to explore in a new group experience I'm doing called Navigate Your Dash. That's the new small group experience I'm starting at the end of September. We're going to look more closely at ourselves, always starting with ourselves, the people around us, and some of the patterns that shape the way we experience our lives and work. And that helps us better understand how other people's patterns shape the way they're experiencing life and work. Not so we can find more things to fix, but so we can better understand what's actually happening and navigate it differently. Because we're never going to understand everything we think we do. So I'll put the information in the show notes. And if it sounds like something that would be helpful for you, or if you know someone else you think it might help, I would love to have you join us. I would love to have the people you know join us. So I'll put that in the show notes and I would love to have you. And if you're going to be at the Hawkeye Chapter ATD conference on September 30th, or if you'd even consider going, I would love for you to look at those details as well, especially if you're already in Iowa. What the heck? So I'll be digging into this idea from a team and workplace perspective in particular in that session. Teams from the inside out, creating shared context for greater impact. That's what the session is all about. Would love to have you there as well. So I will put the conference registration information in the show notes. You can find it there. I will put all the details around the group experience starting in September in the show notes, so you can find it there. And whether I see you at one of these or not, I hope you'll take this question with you. What am I missing? So when you find yourself thinking, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with me? See if you can shift to that. What am I missing? And it's not necessarily going to be natural. It's something that needs to be practiced, just like everything else in life. So when you're convinced you're already understanding what's happening, you're probably not. So ask yourself at least one more time. You probably won't have an answer at first. You'll probably need to keep digging. But the question itself creates a little space between what's happening and the meaning you have assigned to it. And sometimes that little bit of space is enough to change what happens next. We get one dash between the dates. And so much of how we experience that dash comes down to how we relate to the people we work with, to the people we love, to the people who confuse the crap out of us, how we relate to the experiences we're having and to ourselves. So thank you for being here, and I will see you next time. Have a great one. Thanks so much for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player, tell your friends, and leave us a review. Follow me on my social media platforms highlighted in the show notes, and get in touch with me at thedashmindset.com. Share the topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. We'll see you next time. Design and differentiate your Dash your way and make today amazing.